Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 26 of EXP Culturecast. This is EXP's official diversity, equity, and inclusion podcast. As always, I'm your host, Cody Gilkeson, Senior Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and Staff Chair of One EXP. It's April, and we're talking about Fair Housing Month, so I couldn't think of anybody better to get on this program than our very own Patrick Lynch. Welcome, Patrick. Do you want to give a little background on yourself?
Well, thank you, Cody. I really appreciate you having me. Just a little bit, my name is Patrick Lynch. I am in Chicago. I've been with EXP for 12 and a half years now. I was one of the early ones. In fact, my agent number is 87.
Wow.
And I was the launching broker for the state of Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also now in my afterlife, the president of the Illinois chapter of the LGBTQ Real Estate Alliance,
Awesome.
which is a national 501c6 organization. And our charge is to level the playing field when it comes to housing inequality for the LGBTQ community.
That's amazing. We'd love to hear that. And you've had some involvement with the National Association of Realtors as well, right?
I have, yes. I've sat on a number of committees for NAR. Most recently, I was on the committee, the Professional Standards Committee, for a number of years, and then also I had the honor to sit on the subcommittee under Professional Standards that was in charge of creating what eventually became Standard of Practice 10-5, which, as we all know now, is the teeth in Article 10 of the Code of Ethics that makes it an infraction to use hate speech, whether you're on the clock or off the clock, towards any of the protected classes, of which LGBTQ community, so sexual orientation and gender identity.
Amazing. Such a brilliant accomplishment. It's such a great step forward for NAR, and knowing we had someone sitting at the table for that conversation and leading the charge there is just it fills my heart with joy to work at EXP in such great company. It's always been a pleasure to know you, Patrick.
Well, it's funny. While we were in the moment, we weren't really grasping, or at least some of us weren't, what we were about to do. And as we started the deliberations in forming what eventually became 10-5, I realized that this is a significant moment. And I also realized right around that time, especially when we had some naysayers at the table, that I was the only person at that table, that subcommittee of, I believe, 15 or 17, that would be directly impacted by what we were doing, which tells the composition of the committee. And at one point, to drive home that point, I then said, look, I have to tell you, I looked around this room and I'm the only one that's going to be impacted by this directly. And the fact that we can't come to an agreement on getting this done, I say the time is now. And that actually sent it over the edge, and it passed. So
wow, that's a heck of a story. Wow.
So
Fair Housing Month. Can you share with our listeners what Fair Housing Month means to you personally, and why it's important for us in this industry and the public in general?
Starting with me and then building outward, I think it might come to the surprise of many that it's still, in 28 states, it's still legal to discriminate against somebody in the LGBTQ community. So as a gay man, I can be denied access through whatever means, through a property management company, through being denied a mortgage, being denied a lease if I were looking for a lease, just because I'm gay. And that's that is true in 28 states still. And I think there are sometimes people who live in major urban areas that have those protections in those states. Sometimes we forget that is not the case nationwide. And for me, and then for the alliance, and for the community, fair housing is, for us, it's having equal access to housing, right? To be given to be giving a fair chance, a level playing field, um, and and everything that I do in my involvement with the community uh, is actually driven towards that end.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, and people don't recognize the urgency of this. That it's still the case. People assumed, like on a lot of stuff that had to do with queer identities, people assumed that once gay marriage passed, that the conversation was over, right? And it
Right.
couldn't be further from the truth. You can still be fired for being gay in many states, and be discriminated against in housing, and there's a lot of different things going
And
on.
and as we know, these things happen, and sometimes they happen, without an official reason,
Mhm.
which makes it more difficult to try to argue or try to prove it. Um, Also, which is this is very common in many states. You have a major urban metropolitan area that is very LGBTQ friendly, but then you have other parts of the state that are not.
Yeah.
And it one would argue that the services of the community, and as they relate to fair housing, are probably needed more so in those downstate areas, if you will.
Yeah, I live in one of those areas, right? I'm in
Uh,
Illinois, but I'm
that's
down in
right.
little Danville with nothing but corn and poorly worded political signs. We'll put it that way. Not safe for work political signs in every other yard here. Yeah, so
Right. Yeah.
it's
So
yeah,
you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's sad. It's unfortunate that that we're in 2024, yet uh, these fears still exist. Housing is a basic, it's a basic need. It's a basic right. To have, to feel safe in their home
Right,
is something that all of us, you know, earned and deserved, and should be entitled to.
right. Yeah, that sense of safety for sure. I mean, it's life,
Exactly.
liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You can't have any of those things if you're not safe, right?
Right.
So
Another way that I convey it to people who are suddenly, caught, with this knowledge, um, I say, you know, it's basically Maslow's hierarchy, right? You
mhm,
can't, it's very difficult to try to instill in somebody, this sense of purpose and higher being, and acting in the greater good, which is a higher level in Maslow's triangle. When they're just in survival mode. They're at
mm,
the bottom rung, trying to figure out, how they're going to put food on the table, right? And you find that is the case with many people um, in disadvantaged uh, uh, classes, including the LGBTQ community. And
right.
I'm sorry if I'm bringing this uh, back to the LGBTQ community on a regular basis, but that's that's
Yeah.
my
I
focus.
I do it myself, right? That's
Right,
that's where we come home to. This is how we relate, right? And this is the storytelling podcast, so it's got to relate.
right,
Um,
exactly.
yeah. So tell me about what initiatives you've seen, either at NAR or at the Alliance, to sort of try and address fair housing issues.
Um, well, there are a couple things, but the one that I think I will focus on mostly um, is this database that we at the Alliance have just put together. Uh, to try to educate the public and our members. And just so your audience knows, our members are comprised of those real estate professionals in or part of the LGBTQ community and allies, right? Because we recognize that nobody lives on an island, and and we all we all row the same boat. We're all in that same boat, and as we know, especially at EXP, a rising tide lifts all boats. And and we welcome the allies into our family as well as the LGBTQ community. And and we have members that that donate to political causes, and that those political causes sometimes involve donating to candidates who are running for office or who are running for re-election. And those dollars are donated through the Realtor Political Action Committee, or RPAC.
Mhm.
Well, up until recently, we had no real say in where those dollars went. And as we've learned, oftentimes those dollars went to candidates who were actively working against the LGBTQ community. They were actively sponsoring bills in Congress or in their state legislatures that would take away rights of the community or work against what we're trying to accomplish. And there comes the time when you can't you can't justify that. But there was no way of knowing who they were. And now we have this. We've now created this database pulling from the database of the ACLU and from organizations that already have this data. It's just not been parsed out and aggregated in a way that you know can help people identify. And now you can go to our website and go to this database, and you can see which members of Congress in your state legislatures are sponsoring bills that are supportive of or against, and then make your decision. Right? It educates our members on who the good people are and who the bad people are.
Right.
Yeah, not to bring it,
Right.
make it so black and white, but
Right. The
it
people
comes.
voting in your interest and the people voting against your interests, right?
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And I get sometimes, you have to you have to donate to somebody that's better than the other, right? Like the alternative is far worse than. And um, if you can arm yourself with more information so that you can make that educated decision, which is actually, if you think about it, exactly what we do as real estate professionals,
Right.
right? The ultimate decision on buying or selling any particular property or any offer comes down to what the client wants. It's up to us as professionals to give our clients as much information so they can make that educated decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly it. And I think that's a great resource to have. Sometimes we just don't know
Right.
what the people are and we are in a pretty divided country at the moment. But even along those lines,
No,
there are
really?
separators, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, if you hadn't noticed.
Hello.
But sometimes the lines are blurred. We here
Well,
in
I
my
think.
little town of Danville, Illinois, we have a mayor
Uh-huh.
who we voted in, who supported our interests and changed his mind on those interests the minute he got into power. So you never know what's going to happen. And
Do you think that it's a he, it's a male?
mhm,
Okay. So do you think he actually evolved and changed his mind, or did he pander to the
he pandered to
community? Yeah,
the loudest voices in the crowd. Yeah,
that's yeah,
that's exactly it.
that's not.
Yeah,
There's a good place for those people afterlife.
yeah.
And
Very, very true.
so duplicitous.
So
Anyway,
so misconceptions about fair housing laws and practices. What are some misconceptions that we can help to dispel, and what kind of resources can we give people to help them, not to help them understand this better and not fall into the sort of biased camp of not understanding here?
well, I think people who are not aware or not familiar or not educated on on the subject of fair housing, um, I find oftentimes we'll just lump many issues together under one term that they can think of at the moment. Uh, Fair housing seems to be one of them.
Hmm.
Fair housing seems to be lumped in with affordable housing, right, or low income housing.
Hmm.
And the reality is that these are different things, and you they're not mutually exclusive. Uh, at the same time, uh, you don't have to bite off all of it in order to make progress, right? As we know, in our businesses, it's the incremental changes, the incremental um, improvements that allow you to take that next step, ratchet up the next the next level. And me being more pragmatic, uh, I adopt that approach, to make those incremental changes. And bringing them back to fair housing, there's fair housing is not necessarily low income housing or affordable housing, just like affordable housing isn't necessarily low income housing. Um, and the concept of fair housing has to do with having having equal access, and that access being a comparable living environment that everyone else has,
Right.
right? It's not giving something additional or making it making it bigger than it is. let's just let's just assume that everybody is not trying to game the system, and let's just look at this from a human perspective, right? There are some people that find themselves in different situations in life. Happens to all of us. But sometimes you just need just a little helping hand, right? Or as it relates more to fair housing, we're having situations where we have our service providers that are no longer able to live in the communities where they work. And that's certainly happening in major metropolitan areas, Chicago, suburban Chicago,
Mhm.
where teachers and fire departments, and police, your police officers, all your service providers can't afford to live in the neighborhoods where they're working.
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
and so fair housing in that instance applies to equal access to affordable. Or there's a term that I've heard recently, and I started researching it, and before I start rolling it out, I want to do a little more research about it, but that the term is workforce housing,
Mm.
because affordable housing is different from one community to the next, right? Or one neighborhood to the next,
Right.
in terms of a city like Chicago. So, what's affordable in, say, Lincoln Park or the Gold Coast downtown neighborhoods is very different than in Old Irving, right? What's affordable in Schaumburg is going to be measured differently than in Austin, Texas, right?
Hmm.
Or Topeka. And so, um, because affordable housing as a term has been, I think, overused, and one of those terms that everybody seems to use as a big old bucket, and everything that they don't like gets thrown into this bucket of fair housing or affordable housing. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not an expert on this, but workforce housing seems to address that in a way where people can get behind it and view fair housing in a more way that impacts communities, because
Right.
that's exactly what is happening.
Yeah, it's so
Impacting
true.
communities.
Yeah, yeah. I see it in my community that
Right,
here in Danville, it's mostly factory jobs, right?
right.
And the housing is affordable here for factories. Across the border, 5 miles away from me is the border for Indiana. The
Mhm.
housing market is completely different there. Those people also primarily working factory jobs,
Right.
but not only the managers at the factory can afford the housing there. So they
Oh, is
live
that right?
here in Danville and they travel to Indiana to work because there's no affordable housing there. Every
Right.
house that's on the market is significantly more, or even the houses that they can rent are significantly more than they could ever afford on a factory salary. Um,
And unfortunately, the powers that be in local government, I don't want to say universally, but oftentimes either allow those inequities to remain or adopt policies that create it or perpetuate it.
right,
Um,
right. And
and
even then, you get deeper into more issues where, yes, we have affordable housing in Danville, but the areas you would be living in are not safe.
right,
Right.
right.
So there's,
There's the catch 22. Why is it that affordable housing has to be equated with crime and unsafe living conditions?
right.
I
Yeah.
mean, just because just because somebody earns a different salary or a different wage than somebody else doesn't mean that they have any less need or desire for safe environment or safe schools or I mean any of the things that we all seek for ourselves and for our families.
Right.
I mean, the last time I looked, we all breathe the same air,
It's true.
and you know, as soon as we we all just get to that, right? And every decision we make, we should just think about that. In terms of fair housing, in terms of the environment, in terms of a business development, in terms of creating jobs, right?
Mm.
Let's just stop. Remember, we're all breathing the same air, so I don't
Yeah.
know. Call me
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's that love thy neighbor type thing, right? That we always try to. That's kind of my bread and butter here at the DEI team is convincing us to love thy neighbor.
Right,
Um,
right,
even
exactly.
thy neighbor that's living, down the street in a house that's one red line away from being condemned is still your neighbor, right?
That's
Yeah,
exactly right. Right, because that neighbor, might be the teacher of your children,
might be. Hmm.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or one's children. Right.
Yeah, right. So, are there any recent developments or trend in the real estate industry that you
Oh,
believe
nothing new is going on in the real estate industry right now.
that might have a significant implication on fair housing? Right? What do you see
Well,
happening? I mean, there's obviously the NAR settlement. What we'll get right
well,
into this one.
sure.
It
Yeah,
affects you too.
let's dive right in, right?
Yeah.
Um, well, sure. Depending on how well, certainly the way the settlement is being messaged, and you know, and these messages are creating little snowballs of their own, that gain momentum. And as we know, if social media starts magnifying it, then then it must be true. So, you know, how that impacts fair housing? Well, if people are going to presume that buyer agents are going away, who's the audience that's most impacted? Arguably, those that can't afford a a buyer agent, assuming that it's going to be an out of pocket situation for buyer agent commission. Um, I actually think that all the supporting industries surrounding real estate are all going to be working together to create an environment that doesn't impact those in various socioeconomic backgrounds. Because the system that we have right now was created by those industries: the title industry, the mortgage industry, the legal industry, right, and our industry. I mean, the bed that we have was made by all of us years ago, right? No one industry did it. There are those that would make the argument that NAR was the one that took the lead, and that I'm not here to speak to that in in either direction. But as all of this relates to fair housing, there's a real risk of those who can't come out of pocket to pay for for representation on the buyer side, and if there's no way to create a negotiated way for the agents to be compensated, there might be people that will try to go it on their own, and we know what happens there, right?
Right.
They wind up buying a defective property, or they pay too much, or they get a less than favorable mortgage in terms of interest rate or other terms.
Right.
All the things that we as buyer agents look out for when representing our clients. And so, there's a real risk. And I think we as an industry need to be aware of that those who can't afford the best attorney or can't afford some things might find themselves at a disadvantage. And we as an industry need to be acutely aware of that and fight for the infrastructure that needs to come behind the settlement,
Right.
so that fair housing doesn't become part of the fallout, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'm not an agent, and my family is not agents. And what I'm hearing from them when they hear about this settlement is they don't understand what they're reading in those articles. All they're seeing is housing is going to be more affordable. Right. That's what they're hearing. That's the message
Right.
that they're taking away.
That
Right.
is the message. And probably working for a real estate company, you've learned, that's not the case.
Right.
And are you able to have a conversation, engage them in the conversation, and say, no, that's not right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It does take a level of, I don't know. There's something about the way that it's being messaged in the media that I feel like people aren't getting an accurate depiction of what it's going to be like. And the other side of that is we've seen a growing number of people that I talk to. When I'm talking about this with conversation with friends that aren't in the industry, this is another reason why they would forego the home buying process altogether and continue to rent. Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So there are some that would say, screw it.
It's too
I'm not gonna
complicated.
do it.
Yeah. When that
Wow.
is very clearly from someone from an outside view, not the best financial decision for them to continue to rent. Right.
Right. Exactly. Well, that sounds like an opportunity for our industry, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. This
To
gives us
recognize that this is going to be the reality for some segments of our population, and it's incumbent upon us as professionals to be that trusted advisor for those that need it, right? And as we know, it comes back. It comes back in spades. It's an opportunity to really demonstrate that we have our client's best interest, in mind at the front. we as an industry just haven't done a good job at that.
Right. Let's talk about. I want to specifically talk about, because I know the LGBTQ plus Alliance is a big proponent of this, and I am too. And I think I would like to speak to this topic, is the Equality Act and the importance that this could have on fair housing, and why we are so supportive of this. A lot of people don't even know that this is an act that's been proposed for what feels like a century, and has not been able to be passed. But let's talk a little bit about the Equality Act.
Well, it's funny. I'm so glad you're bringing up the Equality Act, because this is the cornerstone, in my opinion, the linchpin, if you will, no pun intended. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
You can exist.
It is the one piece of legislation that can really just take care of everything, and of course, in the Supreme Court rulings in Bostock, that the risk of Bostock goes away with the Equality Act.
Mm-hmm.
I think what would also surprise many people is that it was the House of Representatives that actually passed the Equality Act. They voted on it, and it's passed, which is mind-boggling.
It is, yeah.
And it passed in a Republican Congress.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Senate where it's held up,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where it sits. And if the Equality Act, basically amends the Civil Rights Act of 1964, where it codifies in that act, which is beyond reproach, sexual orientation and gender identity, along with the other protected classes,
right.
And makes it federal. Because as I mentioned, there are 28 states where sexual orientation and gender identity are not a protected class. The Equality Act will, in one swoop, remedy that. And it's shocking that there is not more discussion about it, because the last time we looked at the data, its support is unquestionable.
Right.
It just is languishing in the Senate right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So contact your congressperson. Contact your senator.
That's exactly right.
The Equality Act passed. It's going to be. It's a major step, right? Probably the most significant step we could have since gay marriage was passed, and it really would do a lot on this topic. Also, with the fair housing space as well.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Right. And it removes the opportunity for any future administration to whittle away at these rights.
Right.
Right. Because if it's a Supreme Court decision, well, as we've learned with Roe, right? That can be undone.
Right.
But when you codify it into law, then it's permanent.
Right. And that's what we need, permanent change. Yeah.
Yep.
So how do you envision the future of fair housing evolving, and what are some opportunities for progress that you're particularly excited about?
Well, there were a few moments of progress, but there, unfortunately, there's been some backsliding in terms of progress. For years, it was a 2 steps forward, 1 step back scenario, and a lot of people are feeling like it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back now.
Mm-hmm.
all one has to do is look at the anti-LGBTQ legislation
Right.
that is just littering
Mhm.
state legislatures around the country.
Over
I mean, there
500 pieces.
over 500 pieces of legislation that have been sponsored
Yeah. This year.
in states,
Yeah.
and that's mind-boggling. I mean, these are efforts to take away rights,
Mhm.
right? Think about that. If people have these rights, and they're not, they're not even equal at this point, right? That's what the Equality Act would take care of. But there's efforts to remove these rights from people, and
Right.
it's beyond me. So in terms of hope, um, uh,
Hope we can get out of this downhill slide, right?
I yeah, I mean, what the hope is, and if there's a positive in any of this that I can share is, um, I hope this is a wake up call for all of us to realize that we can't just sit back and assume
Mhm.
that somebody else is going to do something.
Right.
We can't assume that people's rational approach is going to prevail. We can't assume that that other people will run for office with our interests in mind.
Right.
Um, the saying goes is life is not a spectator sport, and I say neither is politics. And if people don't like the word politics, well, then let's use public service,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
An elected position, right? Uh, there's so many ways that we can get off the sidelines to make an impact, right? To prevent these 500 pieces of legislation from being enacted, to prevent uh, voter suppression laws from being enacted. Uh,
Right.
and a number of years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I took I took a page out of my own messaging playbook and said, you know what? I don't think I really truly understand what the election process is and what it goes into organizing an election. And
Mhm.
so I volunteered to become an election judge here in Chicago. They put us through training. You are responsible for setting up. You're responsible for observing each of the people that come in, make sure that they're registered, give them ballot, and receive the ballot, make sure it gets processed into the machine, and then and close up. And then the operation that takes place, all those machines go back to a central location, and then all those ballots get counted. And I mean, the orchestration that goes into it is mind-boggling.
Mm.
I would have never known had I just said, you know what, I can do this.
Right.
I can't I can't profess I can't encourage people to get off the sidelines and do something in their community, you know, if if I've never done that.
Right.
And so, the hope is that things have gotten so bad that it's forcing people to realize, okay, I need to
You got to
do
do
something,
something. Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
that's what we all need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's that get up off the couch and do it yourself
Right.
moment. It really is.
Right.
And
One of my business coaches said to me years ago, it's like, if not you, then who?
that's yeah. Yeah. That's what got me into my diversity, equity, and inclusion career, to be honest with you, because I
Yeah.
saw stuff happening and nobody was fixing it. And that was my realization. If not me, then who, right? Who's going to do it? I
Right.
don't know anybody else that's better prepared to do it than me. So I'm like, I should just do it, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
the same sort of mentality there.
And that same mentality, can and should apply to the inequities that we see in fair housing,
Mhm.
right? Or anywhere, but as it relates to fair housing and the topic of our conversation, if there are issues that you see that are occurring, you have a voice. Stand up, say something,
Yeah.
right? If I'm not saying to take the law into your own hands. I'm saying that there are ways to impact change when something is awry, when something is not right, right? Uh, the best way to do that is to educate yourself, right? To do a little research,
Mhm.
right? Before before you starting to yell at people
Yeah.
and starting to shame people. uh, Educate yourself first.
Mhm.
Understand that there's probably a history and a backstory, and that will give you you know that'll help you create a path for how you can meander and weave yourself into a situation where you can impact change.
Right. I mean, we are in a situation when we're in such a divided country that it is so important for everyone on both sides of the aisle to learn the other side's point of view and not the emotional part of it, the rational part of it. What led them to these decisions? We're very emotional about all of this
Right.
as a country right now. And if you take all of that out and look at rationally, here are the facts. Maybe you can make a better decision, and maybe you can create a connection with someone, right? So that you can really understand. We certainly can't change anybody's mind by just digging your heels in and yelling back and forth about how emotional you are about it. It's never going to work, right?
No, you have to listen to the other side. You have to understand, try to understand where they're coming from, what their perspective is, why they're making the conclusions that they are. Why do
Mhm.
they feel that way, right?
Yeah.
And it's another coachingism, but if we all would just listen with the intent to understand and not with the intent to respond, we would have a better understanding of the plights of our neighbors,
Yeah, it's so true.
even the
And
ones on the other side of other side of the aisle.
that's so true.
Compromise is not a c word. It's not it's not a four-letter word.
Mhm.
Um, and if anybody has gotten involved with any type of volunteer organization, right? Compromise is the only way that things get accomplished.
It's so true. It's so
There
true.
was there was a um, there and I'm not no, I'm not going to use an example from high school. That's just way too long ago and not relevant. Um, uh, but the debate society, whether I mean, you can create debate societies anywhere, but a debate society is one way that people are forced to argue, quote unquote, argue the other side
Right.
because you're given a topic and you don't get the opportunity. You don't have the chance to pick which side that you would want, right?
Right.
Sometimes you have to pick the side that needs to be argued, and
Mhm.
in doing so, it forces you to understand that side, that
Mm.
perspective,
Yep.
right? And if we would just do that more often,
Yeah.
you know, we
It's a
wouldn't
good
be
exercise. It's a good exercise. Put yourself in the shoes of somebody on the other side of the aisle and try to argue their point. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And that applies to, people who live in the cities, right? Take yourself out of the city, go out to the suburban areas or the rural areas, right?
Come
You
up
know,
Danville.
a field trip, right?
Yeah.
Take the Alliance, the Alliance's Illinois chapter down to for a field trip downstate to Danville,
Yeah.
right? Realize that there's a different perspective,
Mhm.
you know, and it goes the other way. And I mean, if you just think about it from from a human perspective, you know, I mean that's all fair housing really is let's just all get along.
Yeah,
You know, fair is fair, and we know what fair is, right?
it really is. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it might be oversimplifying it, but
Yeah,
um,
that's, I mean, I have to often describe to people who don't understand DEI what my job is.
mhm.
And, at the very basic level, it's I help people learn to respect each other.
There you go.
That's it.
There you go.
That's it.
And
And it's like, you were there at the LGBTQ plus Real Estate Alliance symposium a couple years ago when Jonathan Lovett, this stuck with
oh
me.
yeah,
When Jonathan
mhm,
Lovett said, it doesn't have to happen to you for you to give a damn.
that's exactly right.
That's it, right? I mean, that's when I give my DEI, or yeah, my DEI general session, which is like the 15-minute that I take around to the state meetings. I close with that slide because it's important. That, I mean, that's it. That's it. That's the whole message, right?
Right,
You don't.
right,
It's up to all of us to care about each other.
right, right. And if that takes becoming certified in mediation,
Yeah,
well, sometimes it's that. But I love the way you phrase that, Cody. I help people to get along. That's
yeah. Help
that's
people
brilliant,
respect each other. That's all.
right? You know,
Yeah.
instead of leading with the title, because I hate titles,
Hmm.
right? Because they classify, right? I mean, they
They do.
categorize.
They do. And unfortunately,
Um,
there are three words DEI in my title that are majorly under fire these days. Those initials are there. That's a
right,
political statement. Just that title right now.
right, right.
So,
That's why I bring it up, because I
right.
was just reading about it this morning, that that if people would stop glomming onto the title as it's as a mass, right? DEI,
Hmm.
right? Same with fair housing, affordable housing,
That's it.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, people remove the humanity from what the intent is, and they're attacking the title,
Yeah. The
right?
idea of the words. Yeah. That's
Right.
it.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, if there's a way for you to come up with, um, I am the director of helping people get along.
Yeah. Right. That's. I mean, that's. I'm the CRO. I'm the Chief Respect Officer. There it is. There you
There you go.
go. There it is.
Wait, I think you just planted the seed. Somebody listening is going to run with that, and by
I
the
mean,
end of
there's
the
a
day,
reason we
somebody's
do
going.
these. I mean, we don't at EXP. We don't have an HR team. We have a people team. Words matter, right?
Absolutely, they do. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. And if changing the word, helps people get past the mental roadblock and onto the substance,
Hmm.
what's at heart of what's going on, well, fine, so be it.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. So we always close with this question, and I'll pose it to you.
Okay.
If you were approached by someone who's coming to EXP today on their first day at EXP, what advice would you give them?
So they've already joined and they're with the company and it's their first day.
Hmm.
Wow. Well, I resist saying, well, you're probably feeling like you're trying to drink from a fire hose, because everybody says that.
Right.
Although by me just saying it, I just said it, right?
Yeah, you did say it.
Oh boy. Um, there is someone someone for everyone,
Mhm.
and there are a lot of people with endless amount of heart and desire to help you succeed,
Mhm.
and find find those people and keep
That's
them
it.
close.
We are 26 episodes in, and the common theme for the answers to these questions every time is find your tribe.
Is that right?
That's it.
Oh, there you go.
There it is. Find your tribe.
Wow.
So if you want to find your tribe, for those that are listening and you don't know about this, I always take the opportunity to plug 1EXP. 1EXP has 12 going on 15 resource groups for folks from all different backgrounds. You don't have to be a member of one of these identifiers, but you can have respect for the people of those identifiers, be a good ally of those people.
Allies. That's right.
Yeah.
We call them allies.
And yeah, so we have a number of groups. I would encourage you to go check out the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion workplace page. Right there, pinned at the very top of that page, is a list of all of the resource groups and their leaders, as well as a slide that'll tell you what the current opportunities are for the resource groups. I can tell you right now, we're hurting. We got 2 resource groups with no leadership. So if you feel called to serve for EXP Middle East or EXP South Asian Network, we could really use you. We also could use a new co-chair for EXP Indigenous Network that's being run by one wonderful woman at the moment. We're also looking for DEI champions at almost all of our resource groups. That's a great way for a staff member to get their foot in the door and get noticed. And I can tell you, we've always said it was a great way to get your foot in the door, but now more than ever, we have currently, I think, 4 former DEI champions serving in chairman positions at resource groups.
Wow.
So it's a way for you to get in your door, get your foot in the door, and when you go home at night and lay your head on your pillow, feel good about what you did that day. So, Patrick, I want to thank you very, very much for joining me on here. And this has been another episode of the Culturecast. This is the bi-weekly podcast about what makes us us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Cody.